Welcome to episode 486 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Ben Hilton. He's Emile Evanesian, and we've got two things on tap for you today. One, looking over the preseason roster and previewing some of the Barca Femini at the Women's World Cup. That's number two. Both of those things kick off in the next 2 days. Sounds like there's no rest for the wicked, Emile.
There really isn't. It's really funny. We were talking. I was having lunch with last weekend with some friends, and we were saying that I guess what is it, like August 12th or 13th is when the La Liga season actually begins. And I mean, it's asinine. I do think sometimes they literally get shorter and shorter, but it really just viscerally it feels like the off season is shorter and shorter every year.
Well, this one actually was because
exactly. Yeah.
it's about a week or two because of the World Cup, that being the Men's World Cup over the winter. That pushed everything back like a week or two, and everything gets started around the same time. So that means that we also don't have time, nor do I care too much to talk about the João Felix rumors. So we won't do that. Let's start again with the first team heading to America here. Before we get to the 32 names on the U.S. tour, let's talk about the names that didn't make the cut. And that starts with Nico Gonzalez and Arnau Tenas. Nico was told personally by Xavi on Monday that he would be getting limited minutes this season. Does that mean he's going out on loan again, or he's going to be sold with a buyback? Seems like Porto's the favorite, and they would like to purchase him, or at least have a loan with not a mandatory purchase option, but something that they can easily reach. And then there's Girona and Real Betis are the two other options, but it seems like Porto is the favorite here. And, all three of those teams are what I'd expect his level to be. He wants to play Champions League football. That means Porto would be the answer. And you sure as heck, if you're Barcelona, better try to keep that buyback clause low in case he does blow up and in case he does become something special. And then Arnau Tenas, he will not be the third goalkeeper next season, and it seems like at 22, his time at Barca is over. And it's tough because as a goalkeeper coming from the club's academy or any club's academy, you either have to have perfect timing and you have to have either a backup spot when you get it, like Iñaki Peña did, or you're not going to have any opportunities at all, even as a third goalkeeper, that being Arnau Tenas. And Iñaki Peña meant that Tenas could never have that perfect timing. It's unfortunate. And obviously Ter Stegen, it's not that having a backup matters too much. But yeah, in case of emergency, you want to have the best backups you can have. And Iñaki Peña, is he that? I'm not sure about that, but Arnau Tenas, there was no reason at 22 for him to be sitting around for another year. Now, going through the rest of that list, Angel Alarcón isn't fit yet. That's why he didn't make the trip. He could be around the first team later, though. We'll have to see what kind of attacking needs Xavi needs this season. Chadi Riyad and Estanis Pedrola, center back and winger, both appear to be going out on loan. Less likely they'll be sold. More likely they'll be going on a loan to a second division team or a low-level first division teams. And again, if there was a transfer, either of those players, there would be a buyback included. Then the players who were training from the academy and didn't make the trip, that being Marc G, Pau Prim, Pau Cubarsí, and Hector Fort. I wasn't sure about them because of the positions they play, whether or not they would make the trip, because I think the positions they play, that being G is a number 9, which could be useful for the first team at the moment until Vitor Roque shows up next summer, of course. Prim is a defensive midfielder, which of course is a need. Cubarsí is a really highly rated center back at 16, and Hector Fort, a promising right back who's still just 16 too. And for Fort, I've seen the reports, and I did not watch the U17 Spain squad. It's been said that he has struggled the last few months for club and country, but he is also 16 and was playing up a bunch of levels in all those competitions, so I'm not sweating any of that at all. But in the case of those four, yeah, it just seems like a little bit too soon for two 17-year-olds and two 16-year-olds, so Xavi decided to keep them in Barcelona even again, though I think they get their call-ups in training because of the positions they play, and those are positions of need. So then you have Alex Collado. He's already on his way to Real Betis, having forgiven half of the remaining, apparently $2.7 million on his contract. So cheers to him. Cheers to Alex Collado for taking that little bit of pay cut to get out. Barca also have a 30% sell-on clause, which is rather high for a player, again, that paid his own way out. Not because he was desperate to get out, just because, again, he was doing a tour to the club. But again, apparently that was about 2.7 mil less on the contract. So again, if he paid half of that, that's about 1.35 mil out of his own pocket. And he has not made that much money either. So for him to pay that much, that's kind of a bet on himself that he'll have much more success financially in the future as well. Of that whole list here, it starts, the only real surprise, I guess, would be Nico Gonzalez. But it seems like he and Kessié, as we've already talked about, were inextricably tied together. Kessie is probably sticking around. That
Mm.
means Nico is not, and that was pretty much set in stone. And Xavi again told him personally, "I'm not going to have minutes for you."
Well, I think there's that. Yeah, 'cause, I mean, so I do recall I believe it was the last time I was on, but one of the last couple times I was on, we talked about that exactly, where just given what the club has, what the club is potentially looking to add, and um, how, and just based on what they've gotten out of Kessie and uh, what Nico Gonzalez has shown, um, there wasn't going to be room for both of them. I mean, it would just create you know too much. I don't know that the depth that you would get by keeping Kessie and Nico on the roster is worth sort of the log jam that you would create, and um, essentially you're either going to wind no one's going to be happy. I mean, either you're going to have two guys who are splitting minutes and no one's happy, or one guy's going to be happy with his minutes and you're basically mothballing the other one on the bench. um, Look, I mean, there's been little in over the past year and change with Nico to suggest that he is on the verge of blowing up. I mean, I agree with you that um, if Barca do loan him out or sell him with a buyback, particularly sell him with a buyback, they would do well to keep that number manageable. Just on the on the chance that he winds up being an extremely valuable player down the line. But I don't know, in a weird way, I think if you can sacrifice some of that, lottery ticket element of that transaction to just get more money now, because I don't know how wildly optimistic I am that there is a sort of a Nico blows up, and also Nico blows up in a way that's conducive to thriving in Barca's system. Like I don't know how wildly optimistic I am about that.
Yeah, I mean, but it does show not only if Nico were to have tried to stick around, he would have been the
Mm.
seventh midfielder if
Exactly.
Kessie
Yeah.
isn't leaving. And even if Kessie does, though, like the conversation that Xavi had with Nico is probably the same one that he had with Pablo Torre, who stuck around last year, who is now going on loan to Girona with that Aura Romeu deal with Romeu, of course, and the
Mm.
transfer fee coming the other way. Because right now you have, again, your five midfielders, if you will, Gabi, Pedri, De Jong, Gundogan, and Romeu, and then your six is Kessie, the way that Pablo Torre was a six last year, and he didn't get many minutes. So you expect that Kessie won't get too many minutes, and then you throw Nico Gonzalez on that depth chart. Yeah, and completely unsustainable. And even if Nico had stuck around, maybe Xavi has told Kessie that, hey, I mean, you really will not play here, and if you'd like to leave, and somebody gives you a big number, then we'll see you see the door fine. But for Nico, again, in the long term, he wants to succeed at Barcelona, which again might be just different for timelines. Again, for Nico and for Kessie, because again, Kessie's timeline might not fit Gundogan's in a way that you'd have to hope for Nico that he would think that his does. Now, for the players who may be getting on another plane while they're over there, I don't know if Kessie's on that list, but we'll start with the ones who are definitely on that list. And the club, it basically means instead of getting on another plane halfway through, it basically means the club couldn't move you yet, and obviously still looking to move you. Juan Araujo is actually the biggest surprise for me. He seemed to be heading out to Las Palmas on loan. I didn't think he'd ever come back to Barcelona because again he was at the Gold Cup with Mexico,
Mm.
so I figured he would just kind of get that move done with his agent and then head right
Just go to the
there. But I
Canaries.
guess
Yeah.
yeah, but I guess it is taking a little bit longer for that to happen. So just because you get on that plane doesn't mean that you can't get on another one in the case of Julian Araujo. Along with him, Des, Lenglet, and I'd say Abde, they're all kind of players in limbo right now. But
Yeah.
of that bunch, Emile, obviously the biggest questions are about what Abde can prove to Xavi. I
Mm.
think he gets some minutes on the tour. And it's so interesting because if Barcelona get, as I said, a 60, 70, 80 million euro offer for Rafinha, as important as Rafinha was last year,
Yeah.
now you have a rotation if you're willing to take Ferran Torres on the right with to value the backup to Dembele, and then you have Ansu and Abde on the left. I mean, as far as function and purpose, it means there's
Yeah.
less dead weight in the squad, if you will. And even though, I mean, that's really the question you're asking, right? Is Abde so much of a downgrade from Rafinha that, and then for Ferran Torres, is Ferran Torres going to be that much of a downgrade from Rafinha as the backup right
Oh,
winger
exactly.
and
Yeah.
potentially a starter, as we know, for 35% of the season
Right.
when Dembele inevitably goes down with that injury? So are you going to trust Ferran Torres to be the starter on the right wing? I mean, it feels like a downgrade here, but it also feels like Abde deserves to be in the squad, and I think that's kind of where Xavi's stuck with this.
So I agree now. Now what you said. Now I don't know if anything will get done with Rafinha before the season, and but hypothetically, if it did, and I'm not even saying this, I'm not pounding the table that they should get rid of Rafinha or anything like that. But hypothetically, if they did, if they got a great offer where they either recoup everything they paid or shoot even get something a little bit more, 75 million, let's say. I absolutely do think that as your second right winger, Ferran Torres and 75 million euros, 75 million euros and Ferran Torres being what 65, 70%, and that's probably being unkind to Torres of Rafinha is I mean, it's honestly it's good business and it also declutters the roster in a way where you have a much I don't know, there's just a much more straightforward depth chart. You have your two guys on the right and you have your two guys on the left because with Dembele and Rafinha, obviously Dembele is sort of I guess like the default first choice as long as he's healthy. But you don't have, as of right now, I don't think Ferran Torres has a claim to. I don't know how convincingly or how emphatically Ferran Torres could want or demand a starting job, but in a way that Rafinha for a second straight year, if he's the second choice on the right wing, might start agitating for either a bigger role or something like that, or just any some sort of discord might arise from that. But I think this way you have a very clear hierarchy in each position, and you have okay, not crazy depth, but you have two players who are suited and comfortable in each of those positions, and you know what you have. You know who's number one in each spot. You know who's number two. A little bit of it comes, and I realize no one is purely sort of the quarterback like in an American football way. When they say like if you have two quarterbacks, you really have none. In some of these cases, when you have kind of sometimes it's clutter masquerading as depth, and so I think this way it declutters, so you know who you have, what you have, and what position they're playing.
Yeah, which is weird actually for the left wing there because it means that yes, of course, Xavi could play the four midfield, and that throws everything out of whack when we're talking about this. But I think in a perfect world, Xavi would continue to love to try to play with three up top, three forwards up top, then three midfielders and four at the back. In theory, or maybe again, he's going to try to switch to this 3-2-5 attacking all the time with an additional midfielder. Then we're not having to worry about it. And now you're saying, well, I mean, it's a logjam with that anyway. But now instead, you just get to say, hey, Farron, Ansu, you're really not going to get any minutes because that's going to be what's going to happen on that left wing because you're going to have Balde, particularly as your left winger with that inside forward on the left side instead of the right side with Dembele out there. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Abde certainly adds something different and he can inject something different from the bench. And again, the point is financially, he's a lot cheaper than Rafinha in all those regards. So I think if the club is willing to do it, but it seems like Rafinha, very much like Ferran Torres, all those forwards are kind of hell bent, especially the ones with amortization on their contracts, are all hell bent on staying at Barcelona for the season. And I mean, again, who's to blame them? They just won the Liga. They're looking to be part of the next big project, and that's why they want to stick around. Now, academy kids. Mika Faye just turned 19, left-footed center back, came in from Senegal, is impressing in training. His positioning and physicality seem to be what Xavi is liking. Obviously, you and I have never seen him, but I'm excited to see him. So the fact that he immediately signed and is being immediately brought, I think, is a good sign. Because of the number he was bought for and where he was bought from, I don't think this is like a cachet thing. Like they didn't bring him from another academy. He came from Senegal. They did the scouting, and I know they pipped some other teams for him. But for him again to just be brought in and not send immediately down to Barca Athletic, I don't think that was in his contract. I think he did actually impress. Mark Casado, he's still just 19, and so it's not entirely do or die for him because again, he's just 19. And I didn't see him, and I've always said this, I don't see him as the pivot of the future. I don't think Xavi does either. But he's clean, he works hard, plays his position well, and as I've said for 2 years now, he looks to me like he's going to be a good professional. But there is a lack of certain elite skills, especially with the ball, with long balls in particular that will prevent him from making it with Barca's first team. But I still at 19 don't know what his ceiling is. I think there is still even farther high or higher to go, if you will. And I wonder if we'll see even more of that or how much time he'll actually get on this preseason tour. But he definitely could be certainly some kind of depth somewhere. I don't, again, very much not like the first team. I think his ceiling, to be honest with you, is just below Carlos Alena's. And we know that Carlos, I know they play a little bit of different positions. Casado plays a little farther back than Alenia naturally did. But the point is, I think their level could be very similar with again Casado. I think he has still farther up to go with his ceiling. I think Alenia actually this Hadafe version of him because of where he chose to go. I don't know if this Hadafe version of Alenia is actually almost the not worst case scenario. Obviously, worst case scenario is gone or second or third division. But as far as Alenia, if you play his career out when he was 16 years old 10 times, I think he's around number 4 of 10, if that makes sense. Like from with one being the worst. So I think like 4 of 10 as to where his career could have gone. So Casado, it depends on where he chooses to go or how he progresses. Andre Astralaga, which is also 19, came from Athletic Club when he was 14. He's going to be, I've heard, the third goalkeeper and Barca Athletic starter this season, kind of oscillating between the two, which makes sense. He actually doesn't have as high a ceiling, is what I've been told, or what I see from Arnaud Tanas. I've only seen Astralaga like once or twice before. And then, because but behind him, Diego Cochin and Aaron Bashivili, rather, they are both 17 at the moment and are viewed as the goalkeepers with much higher potential. But as I said about timeline and goalkeepers before, one of those two may match up with Ter Stegen's timeline at 17, while Astralaga may just be a Barca Athletic starter and then moves on. Again, he is 19 at the moment. Lamine Yamal just turned 16, about to sign his contract until 2026. No comments on him. Obviously, he's there for those reasons. How much playing time he gets this year? Well, I think he might make the same number of squads he did last year or more. So I got nothing on Lamine Yamal. Of course, he's there. Fermin Lopez turned 20 in May. That's the name that no one knows. That's the name that people are going to be asking about. He did go out on loan to Linares last season in the third division, and he put up 12 goals and 4 assists in 40 matches as an attacking midfielder and was the hub of their offense, even in the third division. That says something. So I'll repeat it once again. I've said his story before. I'll repeat it again. He was in a promising midfield with Jorge Alastui, who unfortunately injuries killed his career. He's down in the third division right now, at 21, trying to figure it out. And then Chus Alba, who's still with Barca Athletic. Xavi doesn't seem to be keen on him. He's still 20. And then Marc Casado. But due to not growing like the rest of the other three of them, he was by far the smallest player on the field with the U18s when I watched him. And he did that. And that means he had to do a second year with the U18s as well. So he did not move up to the U19s as everybody else. You fast forward 3 years, and he's not only grown into his body quite a bit, but now it seems like he's really found his way as a player. Confidence can be a helpful thing, and it seems like he is coming to that preseason with a lot of confidence. And yeah, I have no idea now what happens to him. It seems like if he sticks around Barca, he's going to be one of the better players for Barca Athletic, and that is really exciting. In a way that last year, I believe Antonio Aranda went on the tour, and he was 22 at the time, and I knew he didn't have a high ceiling. Everybody knew that, but yeah, Fermin Lopez, again, just turned 20 2 months ago. Who knows where his ceiling is? Very exciting. Two more. Alex Valle, left back, who went on loan to Andorra last January. He was a regular for Barca Athletic, but he made the jump up to the second division to play with Andorra, where he became the backup there, playing 7 matches. So he is physically getting there. And obviously, with Marcos Alonso hanging around, taking a look at left back depth, not a bad thing. I don't know how high Alex Valle's ceiling is, but again, you never know. I mean, he's 19, so jumps happen. It can happen. Alex Balde obviously is always going to probably be blocking him in terms of players at 19 at the left back spot. But again, it's always good to have depth. Alex Garrido is the last one. He's interior. We saw him in one cameo last season. He will play with Barca Athletic this season and arguably be the most important midfielder. And to me, watching him play, I'm reminded of Alex Callado, who I already mentioned, but Garrido could have a higher ceiling than Callado. Him at 19 is what I saw from Callado at 21. So we'll have to see how this next year and the year after do play out for Garrido. So of that group, kind of interesting. Again, Faye, I think, is the one, and Lamine Yamal, those two, honestly, are the ones I'm most interested to see. And then Fermin Lopez, I don't expect him to be in the first team, but there's a reason he's going on this tour. So I'm also interested to see what he has to bring.
I kind of started formulating this thought when you were talking about Carlos Alenia, but it sort of tied in as you spoke about the ceilings of for a few of these guys, and I think there's always so much, and particularly with Barca, I think um, even in the best of times, there's pressure to, you want every player to be, some manner of elite, and rarely is Barca truly kind of happy with the player whose ceiling is sort of solid organizational depth. You know what I mean? Like, you need those people, and obviously they kind of organically pop up. Sometimes they're prospects who didn't work out, as stars, but they become
Mhm.
just functional pieces. Sometimes it's really like those underdog, non-prospect types that, you know punch beyond their level, but their level is never going to be stardom. So I think there's a certain element of, now I don't know specifically which players I would essentially sort of push my chips in with or not, but I think that particularly, and I hate to bring it back to this, we haven't actually talked about it yet, but like just the as long as finances are still front and center, and so a thing to be considered, and I don't even mean to be considered, like a legitimate, cost controls are a big thing, and particularly for the next couple of years too, as the stadium issues are whatever they are. um I think that's where this team is going to have to find its organizational depth. You know what I mean? Like you're like you said, the your sixth midfielder, or your fifth center back, or your sixth defender, seventh defender, something like that. And I'm actually going to be very interested to watch these matches and really kind of acquaint myself in a much more, I guess, organic way, not where I'm not kind of cherry picking, highlights from certain games, or seeing the best of someone as you do in highlights, but really just kind of seeing a lot of these guys. It's usually around this time of year when I do that, because I mean, I frankly just don't have tons of time between the men and femini to watch a whole lot of Barca B or Barca Athletic.
Yeah, again, of this group, Lamine Yamal, Faye, I think are the only two that could considerably get time with the first team. Yeah, and the rest again could have cameos and things like that. And unfortunately, I always want to say too, because Gabi and Pedri and Balde are around, as I mentioned with Valle, it makes it a lot harder for everybody else to get some kind of moment or call up. And if I'm Eric Garcia, I'm looking around. I actually put him in the regulars part because it seems like he's going to be sticking around. But again, he's going to be sticking around with the understanding that he's probably not going to get almost any minutes at all with Inigo Martinez arriving. So that brings us to the rest of the group that's gone on the tour. Gundogan, Inigo Martinez, Oro Romeo made the trip. Those are the three new signings. And then the regulars, Ter Stegen, Araujo, Gabi, Dembele, Pedri, Lewandowski, Ansu, Ferran, Inaki Pena, Christensen, Marcus Alonso, Roberto De Jong, Rafinha, Kunde, Eric, and Balde, and throw Kessie, I guess, in that group too as the regulars. So between the new signings and the regulars, I count 21 players for the first team. And my guess is that Xavi regularly goes and rides with 23. So Dest may be sticking around as a right back who can also play left back, and an academy kid will get those regular bench call ups to fill out the bench when there are some injuries. So that way, Alarcon and then Lamine Yamal, they did it last season. I could see those two in particular doing it again this season. So I think, yeah, as far as how Xavi's going, I think some years they've had 25 and they've had to ship some out. But if nobody wants to leave, I mean, even with 21, and I added, again, Rafinha's in that group, as well as Eric, as well as Kessier. So guys who you thought might even be gone, or Ferran and Ansu, right? That's five players right there. And the club, it seems like, are not going to be able to get rid of them. So they're going to have to ride with the 21 they have and see what they can do here. So as I said, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but I think it's 21 plus 2 in most of the team. And the real question is, again, the plus one. Is it Juan Araujo? Likely not. Is it Dest? Maybe. Again, we have not seen him connected to teams yet, and it's the middle of July, which is pretty telling. Not that Xavi has enjoyed what he saw from him, but rather that it seems like the club is not getting the proper valuation of him. He didn't really play much at AC Milan, and I mean AC Milan, Barcelona, Ajax, like that's a huge, great CV for a young right back. It still is. Like it's still a good, submitting it to other teams, but I think that means that other teams aren't calling, and because Barcelona know they want to get rid of this early 20s right back young prospect, that they're just not giving the valuation of that player that Barcelona is demanding. So I think they're going to hold on to that, and it's unfortunate though because he sticks around Barcelona for 6 months until January, and it's not like he's going to be worth more on the market in January unless teams are desperate. And Barcelona might again be willing to say, all right, let's just eat it until January and then hope that somebody comes along who's desperate, who wants, again, a young right back to see what happens, to try it out, because I can't see any other way of which he'll get a lot of minutes. I mean, because I think, is Xavi going to play Roberto at right back as the backup behind Kunde before he plays Dest?
Given the club's on Dest's CV, and given his still very young age, and given the fact that he has you know physical merits on the pitch, um, first of all, it's kind of interesting to me that no club, even at a lower level, uh, thought it was worth a flyer. That is a little bit of a head scratcher for me, but I agree. I mean, I assume a lot of clubs probably assumed Barca has their price, and I imagine a lot of people were trying any player that Barca is trying to sell. I don't imagine there's a lot of teams lining up to pay top dollar or above market prices when you know that Barca are basically over a barrel. Um, that being said, I mean, so presumably he's unless something changes, presumably he's going to be around till at least January, and I'd be interested. I'm going to predict. I think he gets a shot. Maybe not a shot to be the backup right back or whatever, but I think he gets at least a couple of shots. Here in the preseason and maybe in the early going, just second half subs and things like that to show a little bit of something. Because the benefits of that can be twofold. I mean, first of all, it's just beneficial to this club, to Barca, as far as having young contributors and having just a diversity of talent and greater depth and everything like that. And it gives you a chance to ideally, hopefully, inflate his market value a little bit too. And there's a potential win-win scenario out there where he contributes as a spot as a spot substitute, or in the worst case scenario, spot starter here and there, and all the while rebuilds his value. And you get the contributions from him in the short term, and you're able to actually move him along and clear the decks, and ideally just give him a chance to you know build a prosperous and hopefully lucrative career for himself somewhere else.
Well, I do still think that even if Kessie, the reason why I would say that Kessie is most likely a midfielder to still move on before this window is closed in the next month and a half is because, again, Roberto might be seen as Xavi maybe ahead of Kessie on the depth chart in terms of where he needs to be on the field. Because, again, between Pedri and Gabi and Gundogan up top, with those three interior spots, even if they play again in a 4-3, not a 4-3-3, but if they play that box midfield and Romeu and De Jong, and again it's Roberto being more useful, being able to play defensive midfield as opposed to Kessie, who again, I mean, is he really that right? It's in that four midfield. None of those four spots truly fit Kessie like a glove in a way that it being an interior in a 4-3-3 kind of did a little bit more, being able to go box to box like he does. So I don't know. I think Roberto, whether he's a right back or a defensive midfielder, as I said, like you have to kind of plug him in for at least 20 or 25 showings a season, like without fail. You kind of have to do it. The same thing with I mean Eric last year and maybe Eric this year again. Like you plug him in for like 17 appearances, and it's just a matter of where they come and how they come. And in a perfect world, they only come again Copa del Rey or in Cadiz, or you know what I mean,
Yeah,
like
like
in
mid table
theory.
or mid table or below.
Yeah, but also he played Champions League last year, so I
Well,
mean,
that's
you never
the
know where injuries stand, and you never know how far to your depth chart on every position you go. So again, you always hope that players are fit, but I mean, Pedri's Pedri, Round Araujo, that being is Round Araujo, and you never know. All right, so second part of the show, we'll see how quick we can do this here. The Women's World Cup is kicking off, and so Caroline Graham Hansen and Ingrid Engen will be there for Norway in Group A, and Anna Maria Cernogosevic will be with Switzerland, also in Group A. Asisat Ashwala will be with Nigeria in Group B. England with Kerry Walsh and Lucy Bronze in Group D. But that being England, are without Beth Mead, Fran Kirby, and regular captain Leah Williamson. So a lot more Walsh and Bronze as far as important roles there. England is still one of the favorites in that tournament. Norway is on a favorite, but they could certainly make a run. JC will be there with Group F with Brazil. Group G has Fridolina Rolfo, and then 16-year-old midfielder Giulia Dragoni was signed by
with
Barca in
Italy. Yeah,
January. Played mostly for the Barca Femini B team so far. She is 16, but she is undoubtedly a pretty exciting prospect. She likely won't play with Italy but in case she does, I mean, who knows? Between her and Vicky Lopez, some pretty two exciting young players for Barca. However, Vicky Lopez, a little bit too early for her to get called up to that Spain squad. Because if you notice, I didn't mention Spain. They're the story, of course, in Group C. One of the big stories of the tournament. Barcelona will be sending Catalina Cole, new signing Onabate, Irene Paredes, Laia Codina, Aitana Bonmati, Alexia Buteas, and then B team regular Maria Perez, Mariona Caldente, Salma Pariello, and Jenny Hermoso, who is no longer with Barca but is now at Pachuca, is there
yeah,
too.
but is
Not there is Sandro.
inextricably linked. Yeah.
Exactly. Not there is Sandra Panos, Mapi Leon, Patri, and Claudia Pina,
Yep.
who have not returned after the player dispute that began in August of last year. Panos, they said it was reported, did not return because the manager in Jorge Vilda did not want to create some kind of goalkeeper consternation. But Mapi Leon, Patri, and Claudio Pina continued to refuse to come because again, the whole story is last August, there was a player dispute. It's where it began. The players and some of the more outspoken players and important locker room leaders said to the manager Vilda, "Hey, we don't like the way things are going in training. We're not a fan of the tactics. We're not a fan of the
Well, it was
treatment. We're
also
not a fan of
his
how this is
injury
all going."
management. Like it was how seriously he was taking
Yeah,
injuries and how, yeah, like how well he was actually looking after their health and well being while they were on international
yep.
duty.
And surprise, surprise, Vilda, he's still in charge. He has also gotten support from the RFEF president in Luis
Yep.
Rubiales. So in September of last year, the last 15 or the 15 players who withdrew from the team refused to be called up for a number of months. And as of March, with Alexei Buteas, who obviously was injured for that entire duration, serving as a moderator, some returned for the World Cup and some did not. Aitana has said that she chose to return because of positive changes that the Federation is in the process of making, but not everybody has returned. That's obvious, when that obviously could be a major issue for Spain, but they are still a heavy favorite. And so, of that group, Banmati, Onabate, and Mariona have returned. And as I said, Mapi Leon, Patri, and Claudio Pena, who all would have been in the squad, did not return. So, Emile, do you think, again, the big question? I mean, you could say who the favorites are. Otherwise, I didn't mention the U.S. They are certainly one of the favorites as well, but there are no Barca players. Someday I dream of it, but there are no Barca players
Hmm.
playing for the women of the U.S. Is is Spain truly a favorite? I think that's the big question. I think people are going in. Are they still one of the favorites with all of this consternation, or is this a now? I'm trying to think the year. What was it? Oh, was it France 2010?
Yeah, was
Yeah,
that
it
the
had to
South
be
African
right.
one where they had the full
Yeah, it was.
mutiny?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, France 2010. I mean, is that really what we're looking at? Because again, if things go wrong in the first two games, I could really easily see this team going, "Hey, we told you this is going to go wrong, and we hate that this is going wrong."
So the one I don't know that it can look on the pitch. I could see where it might go a little bit sideways because apparently there was even just like a Barca Real Madrid rift because essentially all of last 15 or last 15 were essentially it was the Barca contingent, and they are without without being too patronizing. I mean, essentially the Barca contingent is the overwhelming vast majority of players of consequence on this team, and so. Um, yeah, so there's apparently a little bit of friction there. So yeah, I mean, some of the Barca players come back, and the Madrid players who dutifully stood by the Spanish Federation and never never uttered a word either. For whatever their reasons were, they're obviously going to get bumped down the pecking order. So there's going to be a little bit of friction there, I believe. Um, and secondly, I mean, it we still need to see. I mean, I'm sure she's going to be fine, but like Alexia has still played very limited, sort of in kind of the games with with live ammo. I mean, she's only played a handful of minutes, um, so it might take a moment to for her to find her groove. I mean, I think obviously, I think they have enough to get through the group without a problem. I don't know that they're. Yeah, I don't buy that this is a whole harmonious camp, especially when you consider that sort of the I guess the mirror image or sort of another version of the Spain situation is what happened with France, where what was her name, Corinne Diacre, their previous manager, who, I mean, if you her controversy section on her Wikipedia page is hefty, and so I mean, she has been basically she had been in open conflict with most of the most important players on the French team. Basically, when she first got the job, she stripped Wendy Renard of uh, Leon of the captaincy, and she subsequently stripped her own handpicked captain of the captaincy and cut her from the team later. So it was a complete mess. And it was Wendy Renard and Amadine Henry and uh, Katoto. Four of their stars basically retired or refused, did kind of the thing that Las Quince did. And but basically the French Federation, despite having given Diacre, the old manager, an extension, axed her, and they've brought in Harvey Renard, who's uh, no relation to Wendy. Um, he's got no experience in the women's game, but he is, he's won the African Cup of Nations twice, and everything kind of coming out of their camp is um, the vibes seem to have improved dramatically. So even if we take sort of the two most openly in revolt teams, so if you take France and Spain as those, I don't think the chasm in talent is so great between the two of them. Where France now, at the very least, for the time being, for the moment, just being on an upswing with players coming
Yeah, I
back,
mean,
and Spain sort of like, and this is a conversation for another day. I do wonder what happens in the Barca dressing room when Aitana and everyone who essentially mediated sort of did the mental gymnastics to get back onto the national team.
well, I mean, I think that's where Alexi Putellas kind of enters in this as that moderator. I think Alexi Putellas, it's going to be exciting to watch this World Cup. I think as a Barca fan, for no other reason than to see her. I mean, arguably 100% fit for the first time in over a year now. To see Alexi Putellas actually there again, and I wouldn't be too concerned about the Barca dressing room for that reason. That Alexi Putellas has grown up with the club. Again, she's been there through thick and thin. Patri the same way. Claudia Pina well, kind of the same way she was brought in, so was Leon. But you get the point. That I think Alexi Bates is the big one, and it's interesting too because Spain they're not missing major players because of injury; they're missing them because of again the omissions and the issues. While again for England, and you mentioned for France, for Henri and for Katoto, they will be missing through injury. The U.S. have a ton of injuries, Mallory Swanson among them, and Sauerbrunn. So they are that being the U.S. as well. Like they're every one of the favorites is missing 3 to 4 players that should have been consummate starters, and Spain is one of the teams that again they're not missing them through injury; they're missing them through the dispute. But they're missing them anyway. So it again, they're like this. Not to say that the Women's World Cup is going to feel a little incomplete when it comes to these squads, but certainly a lot of these squads could be better. But the other end of that is the exciting part of that is that with all of that variance, there are favorites, but you really don't know. It's not like there's 2 or 3 teams that seem like they're going to steamroll everybody else all the
No,
way to
because I
the
think
finals or all the way to
I
whatever.
don't even see the U.S. necessarily. I mean, I would be shocked if if they didn't make the at the very least the semifinal.
This is the weakest U.S. of the last. They've won the last
Yes,
2 World
yeah,
Cups. This is certainly the weakest
exactly.
of the 3 in all regards. So, I mean, for me, I'm excited to see what the best of the rest do. I guess if you will. I mean, Argentina might be fun, and I am also gonna. I mean, I'll try to convince my
Yeah.
mother-in-law to watch the Philippines with me. It's not gonna
Oh
happen. We're
yeah,
obviously not gonna watch it live because it's in Australia, so we have to record it. But
yeah,
they're making their World Cup debut.
yeah.
It would. I mean, they're just a fun story, and I'm hoping they beat New Zealand. I mean, that would be so important for
With
not only women's football football in general in the
Well, they
Philippines,
played the first two
which
games already today. So New Zealand has beaten Norway 1-0,
yeah,
and Australia has beaten Ireland 1-0. But that's Australia and Ireland. They were the two host nations played, so it's one game from Group A and one game from Group B is done. It's not, they didn't do the full like Group A fully, but so
right, yeah, no, in the
so
morning, which is pretty incredible though that again, Caroline Graham Hansen has already been put to the sword once by New Zealand, so that throws that
when like
Group A
when
completely
when
out
I
of
was
whack.
just thinking too, like I mean Norway, basically between the 8-0 thumping that they took from England at the Euros last year, and now rolling out
Mhm.
and losing to New Zealand, who while playing at home, like has no business on a purely talent level competing with
Correct.
Hegerberg, Graham Hansen, Engen, and the Norwegian side, and they just came out and laid an egg in the World Cup opener too.
Yeah. So again, 3 a.m. this
Yeah.
morning. I'll be taping it. We'll see what the Philippines can do. Also, shout out to Megan Reyes, who used to work with me at Blue Wire Podcast Network, and she actually worked for the network as well as just having a podcast. She did a podcast piece on the Philippines women's team that I got to be a part of. Talked a little bit about Paulina Alcantara there, who, for those again who knows their history, knows a connection there between the Philippines and Barcelona in that regard. So I came on as a guest for that. That was a lot of fun. So shouts to her and shouts to the Women's World Cup. Hope you again find the time. It is in again if you're in the U.S. It is in the early morning, so very difficult to watch. It's midnight if you're on the West Coast. It's 3 a.m. if you're on the East Coast usually. And for Barcelona, it's not too much better for you guys. What is it? Yeah, early morning for you, I guess. Like 9 a.m. Yeah,
Now, the one thing that I will say, and I realized as we were talking about this, we touched on a bunch of the different teams and the different nations. Now, because there is no real kind of U.S. connection, there's no Barca connection or anything like that. But very characteristically, you know who's quietly balanced, deep, stacked, and just waiting to be really, really good? Yep.
Germany.
Because I was going through them, I was like, there are no major injuries to speak of. There doesn't
Yep.
seem to be any discord. Like theirs is one of the few FAs that seems to have not, blatantly mistreated its female players.
Yeah, I mean, and they're led by Pop Up
Yeah,
Top, who, if you remember from the Wolfsburg Champions League final with
yeah,
Barcelona, that there are some Germany players, I think, looking for a little bit of revenge on that Spain squad. And I think that's going to be a rallying cry for them.
yeah.
So we'll have to see. Again, that'll wrap up our show. Follow him, Emile. Again, he's got
Mhm.
some good stuff coming out, all about the Ronaldinho
Yep.
signing and different stuff going on here. So on his side of stuff, so give him a follow and then follow us everywhere, the Barcelona podcast, where to find us on all this stuff. So thanks so much for listening to the show. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Forza
Forza
Barca.
Barcelona.